just trying to figure out. Most people, so a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for putting up with the initial craziness. We're usually like this though, so it's good to get an idea of what you're getting into. And for those of you who've been coming for a while, thank you for being here. So we're starting 2016. So this class let me back up and say, this class might be a little bit different than the other classes you attended or attending, because in part, this class will have an entire sort of practice arc for the year. Right? So every weekend is a kind of a cumulative experience based on the previous one and based on the one before that, etc. So our goal, if we can say to have a goal this year, is actually to accomplish something by the end of the year. And that's nothing short of world peace. In a very small way. So the practice will be one that if you can come fairly frequently, life will get in the way, but if you can come fairly frequently, hopefully you will see a very distinct and very practical benefit to that consistency. So, what was that? Okay. So there will be that practical and hopefully that practical benefit from practicing with us. And so for those of you who've been coming for a bit, you'll feel like you're treading old familiar ground at the beginning of the year. And for those of you who are newer, you'll sort of be treading unfamiliar and perhaps somewhat challenging ground. And we'll meet in the middle sometime around April. Just FYI. So, having given you all this supreme confidence through this introduction to the practice, let us begin, as we most often will do, by finding a comfortable and stable seat. So please take a moment to sit comfortably, whatever that means for you. Not feeling rigidly connected or committed to any particular form that sitting might take, but rather responding to your body as it is right now and finding a way to sit that has a sense of ease and dignity. In this class, we begin with a seated posture that embodies a felt sense of dignity and uprightness. And we often hearken to a quote by Dag Hammarskjöld, and that quote is, "The only kind of dignity that is genuine is that which is undiminished by the indifference of others." Which gives us a sense that this dignity arises from an internal felt sense of rightness, of uprightness, of worth. That is not dependent, is not set by the expectations, desires, or needs of other people. Feeling the breath coming in and out of the body. And now, taking the hands to the hip crease for the opening bow, the fingers point in, the elbows point out, creating a strong back and an open heart. As the hands come into this position, the quality becomes even more dignified, almost regal. We become like the lords of our mat, of our life, yet still remaining open, not becoming cold and distant. And we slowly incline the body forward. And come back up. So releasing the hands and opening up the legs, coming to our seat as needed, we find the first preparatory pose, which is butterfly. So let's take the soles of the feet together with the heels generously distanced from the pelvis. Pulling the heels in until we find a good tug in the inner hips, wherever that is for us. And then slowly beginning to draw the body forward until, trapped in the architecture of our body, we find ourselves slowly and gently rounding the torso, the spine, perhaps allowing the head to drop towards the earth. In this first preparatory pose, we hold for 3 minutes. And we open with the first of the 3 questions referenced in the title of the class. And that first question is, am I here now? So we start from a ground that acknowledges our natural tendency to wander away from our current experience. So we're sitting in the posture. We feel the body and its various stretches and movements. And then perhaps we become trapped in a thought. We start to daydream, or begin to catalog the things we could be doing if we weren't trapped here in butterfly for 3 minutes. And then, unexpectedly perhaps, we're suddenly back in the body, back in the room, brought back by something that is just out of the reach of our awareness. But nevertheless, we're back. And when we come back, we ask the question, am I here now? We might begin to recognize, after doing this a few times, that the only answer to this question is yes, I am here now. If you're newer to this practice, we exit the pose after hearing 3 chimes, and each chime is accompanied by a repetition of the question. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? And we slowly start to come up and out of the pose, noticing as we do the sensations arising as we leave the posture. And then we release the legs, stretching out, and we'll come onto our abdomens for the Sphinx pose, the back bend. So please, if you would, coming down to your abdomen, head facing towards the nominal front of the room, towards the windows, if this works for you. And taking your elbows under your body, under your shoulders, to begin to create an architecture of a back bend. You can widen the thighs if you find that you are struggling to relax in your low back, or you may choose to take the elbows forward of the shoulders. For those who already begin with suppleness in the spine, with the elbows under the shoulders, we can straighten the arms. Again, these postures are held for 3 minutes, and we can be over exuberant in our level of effort here. So please try something that is perhaps just beginning to elicit sensation in your body, and stay with that and see what arises, rather than pushing yourself to deep sensation and perhaps finding yourself unable to sustain the pose for the entirety of the practice time. While continuing to maintain awareness of the first question, we can add the second, which is, can I feel what's going on in my body? And this question helps us to differentiate between feeling what is going on and thinking about what we are feeling, or thinking to distract from feeling. Because this first class will be a lot about the three questions, I won't go very much into depth in this opening practice. But we might just, at this point, choose to notice where feeling arises. And noticing how much we feel and where we feel. Feeling the breath. Noting the first question when you come back from any wandering that may occur. And tuning into the feelings arising in the body. Perhaps noting the difference between a feeling in terms of an emotion versus a raw feeling that arises from the sensory system of the body, such as the difference between feeling the quality of the back in this pose and feeling the experience of the emotion that may arise in response to that sensation in the back. Differentiating between the two a little bit if we can. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? And now please slowly come down and pause, finding yourself perhaps still experiencing the pose even after coming out of it in some way. Noticing that too. For the third preparatory pose, keeping our heads oriented towards the front of the room, let's roll onto our backs and begin with the knees bent and the feet flat on the floor. For twisting. So, in order to prevent confusion, we will collectively agree that our right side is closest to the pond and our left side is closest to the stereo cabinet and the wall and the exit. So please, if you would, drop your knees over to the collective left. So impressed. Very nice, everyone. And let's raise the, we'll see if we can do this twice. Let's raise, if you would like to, and if your shoulder allows, the collective right arm. And if, like Bev and Albertina, you're near a wall, feel free to scoot forward a bit. In other words, to scoot towards the back of your mat if you find yourself a little compressed. And finding a stretch in the twist from the hips up to the side waist. And breathing here. Our third and final question: can I relax around that sensation? And in this case, experiencing relaxing as a delay in grasping with words as thoughts onto what we feel. So in holding this posture, we might notice that there's a pull throughout the body, that there's a sensation in the back, perhaps in the armpit, perhaps in the shoulder, just depending upon our bodies, what's tight and what's not. We may feel that, and then we may immediately notice that we label and name it. So we say, oh, that's my shoulder, or, oh, that's a weird sensation in my back. Identifying that activity as the grasping onto feeling. So relaxation, first and foremost, well, actually just first, is about delaying the discursive moment, delaying the moment where we label, analyze, narrate our experience. Of course, if we do that action, we may note the tendency to then evaluate our choice to do that, which tends to lead to the slippery slope of moving away from the present moment. So we're not attempting to censor or evaluate this arising of discursiveness, but rather to relax our mental process. Am I here now? And I feel what's going on in my body. Can I relax around that sensation? So please, slowly return yourself to center, taking your time. Oftentimes the twists, especially when held for this period of time, create some very strong pulls. And so we come out of them and we do feel quite a bit of the residual effect of the twisting. So we take a moment to stretch and release. And then moving the knees to our collective right and choosing to lift the collective left arm if you'd like. Again, noting, not moving too fast here. Settling in. That arm can come up and come all the way to the earth. The other arm can do exactly what it pleases. No right or wrong here. So the 3 questions practice is based on 3 principles, or is undergirded by 3 aspects, which is the 3 questions which you've experienced in the first 3 postures. The form aspect of class is influenced and directed by the wisdom of traditional Chinese medicine and its meridian system. So when we talk about our postures, we talk about them in the context of this system. And the third is the intermingling and weaving of teachings that is in some form nominally connected oftentimes to the Buddhist philosophical tradition. So each class begins with these 3 preparatory poses, proceeding into a physical practice guided by and based upon the meridian system, with the sort of thematic elements related to our relationship to ourselves and to our world, with a goal, we can be said to have a goal this year of really developing some space and openness, even some joy around ourselves and the world around us. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please begin to come back to center. Take a moment or two to stretch and release. And then, if you would, please begin a slow transition back up to seated, as we prepare to begin the main practice. And our practice will focus for the month of January on the liver and the gallbladder, both of which probably need some cleansing at this point. So, we're going to begin with square pose. We use a slightly different terminology here in Yin, but I'll almost always, throughout the beginning of the cycle, sort of also mention the traditional hatha names. So, square pose, also known as double pigeon or fire log pose, Agni Stambhasana, Vipada Kapotasana, is where we stack one leg, in this case stacking the right leg on top of the left with the shin bones parallel. And this will cause a couple of things to happen when we do this. For some people, this is what will happen when we attempt to stack the legs. This is fine. One of the things you will find about Yin, if you haven't practiced it extensively, is that we are ridiculously permissive. We are like the parents you wish you had. You will develop a yogic form of affluenza after taking this class. The point is that we focus more on the feeling, tone, and the architecture of the posture rather than the specifics of the alignment. So in this case, we want to feel the hip action, the outside line of the hip. So you may get that by doing this. You may also get it for some people just by bringing one shin in front of the other and sitting like this. As we move through time in this class and throughout the year, this discursiveness around the postures will become a little bit less, but we'll begin with some more instruction. So, the legs as stacked as you can make them. This may already begin a pull in your hip, but then we begin to walk ourselves forward. And that walking forward may be just a tiptoe step. For others, the body will come all the way down, with the chest leaning on the top leg. Here in the square pose. And again, a bit more talking, beginning of the year. Hopefully we'll move towards more and more quietude as we work together. But no promises. So beginning this year with the liver and the gallbladder. And for those of you who have some knowledge of Western anatomy, you may know that the liver is the kind of great cleanser, great metabolizer. Responsible for really cleansing and purifying the blood of specific substances and transforming and releasing them. And the gallbladder, responsible for secreting bile, which is the substance that emulsifies fat in the diet, allowing it to be digested. The liver, of course, in the Western imagination, seen as a very powerful regenerative organ. The word liver comes from the German Leiber, which has the same quality of life, or to live. And so the liver has something to do with a kind of vitality. Rising from its awareness of its regenerative properties. Springing eternal. And the gallbladder, we may all be familiar with the turn of phrase, you have a lot of gall, meaning that kind of variably translated maybe as chutzpah. It's kind of inappropriate, improper action. Gallbladder. And in traditional Chinese medicine, some of those themes also resonate. But first and foremost, the line of the liver, each of these organs has a line, runs from the toes up through the inner line of the thigh to the hip and up to the physical space of the liver. And the gallbladder running on the outside all the way up through the side body, around into the head and into the eye. For the teachers in the room or those who are interested in these things, we will always think about stretching and or compressing as either providing pressure to or stretching through these lines. hence the double pigeon. Or square pose. Setting foundations with the first practice of the year. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? And slowly begin to come up. Releasing, checking to make sure that your hip still works as you unwind. If you're newer to the practice, you'll begin to sort of get a sense of the sensations and feelings you'll get from a yin practice, which are a little bit different than from a hatha practice or a more physically rambunctious practice. This goes a little bit deeper. You'll notice that you have more of an opportunity to become deeply annoyed. So, all intentional. So let's take the other side. And if you happen to be a person who has radical differences between the two sides of your body, you may choose to notice that in terms of just noticing the feeling and when the feeling starts, and noticing if you have any tendency to want to evaluate, judge, or narrate that. And then, if your body permits, you may choose to come forward, or you may feel yourself a very kind of stuck. One of the qualities that we may choose to notice if we are tight and really don't have much forward motion is whether the position in these postures, when we feel this way, if we feel a little bit like a bug in a collection. I would like to point out that you will never hear that from me. I don't woo. The wonderful thing is you now know what you're missing and can notice the even deeper aggravation and anger that's arising. So back to the liver, which is quite exciting. So in traditional Chinese medicine, the very exciting liver is connected to the emotional life of the individual. It has to do with how we experience relationship with others. And has a quality of wanting to move. It energizes and activates us to want to be in the world. And it is the source from which we draw our planning and dreams. The gallbladder, as its mate, is responsible for taking action on the liver's plans. So the liver strategizes and the gallbladder enacts. So we might say that when the liver is healthy and balanced, there is a ability to create a vision for ourselves that is lacking in neurosis, very sane, and at the same time, in a sense, joyful, in that it is unencumbered by doubt or worry. And that when the gallbladder is healthy, those plans are executed with precision, with skill. What is sometimes called in the Buddhist tradition skillful means. Or in the works of Lao Tzu, balanced relationship with the way, and in the art of war, by taking appropriate action and then stopping. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please start to come up and out, and once again, releasing your hip, stretching out and in. And now, to work with the gallbladder line, many of you have taken class before, are familiar with this stretch. Just demo it before we go into it. So what we'll do is we'll come down to our backs, and so stay seated for just this minute, just right now. We'll extend the left leg out and take the right leg pretty far out on the mat so we can grab it with our arm. We'll shift our entire body a little bit away from the leg and reach up with the left hand and pull the neck to the side. To deepen this stretch, we will walk the foot away rather than pull more strongly here. So we're working on bending gently into the side waist, and bending gently into the side of the neck. So please, if you would, come down onto your backs and begin with the knees bent. If you have any challenges in your low back, you may keep the knees bent the whole time. So let's begin by taking the right foot and stepping it out at the very edge of the mat, or perhaps even onto the floor. Reaching down with the right arm to grasp the ankle, or if the ankle is not accessible, then if you have a hem of a pant leg that you can clasp, that's fine too. So begin to feel kind of this sensation in the shoulder. So we're helping to relax and release the top of the shoulder as well. And then taking the left hand up, grasping very gently the right side of the head and just pulling over a little bit. Now, feeling free to modulate the sensation in the shoulder by walking the foot slightly away from you and choosing to extend the left leg if it's appropriate. In cases where we are working with a slightly smaller muscle group, such as the arms and upper body and the neck, we will hold the posture for a little less time. This is to acknowledge both the smaller nature of these structures as well as because the effects when we stretch them, are typically a little bit more powerful physically. So we'll be working with this energy of the liver and gallbladder throughout the month of January, setting down a foundation of emotional and relational awareness. And from the teaching perspective, we begin with a quote from Basho, a haiku. Along my journey through this transitory world, New Year's house cleaning. Along my journey through this transitory world, New Year's house cleaning. So we'll begin this year by laying some foundation and cleaning house a bit. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So let's release. I encourage you to just do this slowly and intelligently, coming back to center and taking any stretches that you might need. And then we will take the other side. So when you're ready, or at least sometime in the next 30 seconds, please bend your left leg. And stepping your left foot out to the side slightly, reach down with your left arm. Taking a grip of your ankle, and then allowing your right hand to guide the left side of your skull further away from your left shoulder. Using the movement of your left foot to draw your shoulder more deeply down into stretch, and extending the other leg out if you would like. So we'll begin this New Year's house cleaning with a focus on noticing feeling. Beginning with an awareness of where change happens. might begin just by taking a moment in our own headspace to think about, to contemplate. Where does change occur? Where in the world, in our experience, does change happen? And also, what is the nature of that change? In what way do the things that change? Beginning first by noticing or thinking about those things outside of ourselves, our own bodies, our own physical and mental space. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? And can I relax around that sensation? So please begin to release slowly and intelligently. Take a moment to stretch and release. And then slowly beginning to transition back up towards seated, and then shifting onto the shin bones for a wide knees child's pose. So for this wide knees child's pose, beginning perhaps with the toes connected and the thighs coming as wide as is comfortable and possible for you. And then walking ourselves forward and down to the extent we're able, using a long reach through the hands and only very gently pressing ourselves slightly back towards our heels by tractioning the hands into the floor. With the head either neutral or perhaps rotated, depending upon your preference. For some, feeling free to use a prop such as a blanket or block to rest the skull on if the shoulders or hip mobility is such that you are sort of stuck a bit in space. Again, with this position, feeling more of a pull in the inner liver line of the body. And once again, holding the posture for a bit longer. So we might notice when we contemplate where change occurs that we see it in the outside world all the time. We see seasons. We see the growth of plants, animals. We see the aging of those things. And we see them passing away. Of course, depending upon how connected or noticing we are about that cycle, certain aspects of that may surprise us more than others. I'm not sure if any of you have had the experience of walking, for example, near trees, and all of a sudden a squirrel or bird just kind of falls out. I'm still amazed at the idea that birds actually don't live forever. Just randomly going out into my backyard and finding a pigeon, unmauled by anything, just kind of sitting there. Well, not even really sitting there, it's dead, so it's not really doing much. We're seeing that same thing and just seeing it happen with no external force applied. It just happens, passing away. Tree, the plant, the animal. We may experience that just in the world, the earth in general. A rock slide changing the face of a mountainside. Water slowly rubbing away rock. Water drying up. A once roaring stream, now a timid flow. So we may notice these changes out in the world occurring all the time. You might find that the answer is, where does change happen? We say everywhere. This time of year here at the studio, particularly if there's no children around, it's often nice to just sort of sit and watch the ducks in the pond. And I say with no children around because children are absolutely fascinated by their ability to make ducks run around by chasing them. So they're a little bit of an outside influence, strong one. Watch the ducks moving around, changing position. Water never quite still. Just noticing the play and flow. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? Releasing from the posture for some can sometimes be about going forward, and for others about lifting up. In either case, you want to open up the knee and hip joint here, allowing blood and awareness to flow back into the hip and knee joint. So take your time here to release that hip crease and the knee joint, whatever way works for you. And now, quarter dog. So let's take a kneeling position on all fours. This is a back bend to complement the forward bend. And for quarter dog, we just simply reach the arms forward without changing the relationship of the hips and knees. So we begin to sink down into a back bend. Deeply stretching through the front of the torso here. You'll find that there is no kind of absolute posture for each organ. There is only kind of relational practice. So in this case, just using this back bend as a way to open up the spine, to open up the abdomen, the lowest part of the liver line in the torso, and to soothe the body after side and forward bending. We're also getting a little bit of a chance to experience kind of greatest hits of Yin as a starting point. Typically by this point in the practice, people are very much aware if they're coming back. So, it's good to experience all of the body positions that we tend to create: forward bend, back bend, twist, and side bend. And noticing your own tendency. Really noticing how much or little this class annoys you. And we say that lovingly because if you're newer to practice, you'll find that one of our fundamental tenets is the development of patience, which we define as the willingness to be with what is difficult. So change occurring everywhere around us. Much of it, if not almost all of it, completely outside our ability to manipulate or control. Very little change in the world that we can directly flip the switch on, turn up the dial, turn down the dial. So change is happening constantly in the world. And it is largely occurring without our direct influence. Spinning on to its own rhythm and its own relationship, independent of our presence. So noticing, are you here now? And although we try to avoid any kind of overthinking, just perhaps asking yourself, at this point in practice, are you more or less here? Do you ask that question more often? Or less frequently? Or have you even stopped asking at all? We joke that sometimes we need to ask the question, do I want to be here now? Noticing that underlying tension or anxiety. Can I feel what's going on in my body? Do I feel more acutely or less so? And then also connecting to that underlying question of, do I want to feel what's going on in my body? It's much more difficult in this class, although it's possible to kind of wait out your experience. To just sort of grin and bear it, or grit and bear because, well, I can do anything for 5 minutes. And can you relax? Can you relax more easily or less easily? And you might connect that all to, are you more or less agitated or anxious in the practice overall? Are you becoming cooler or are you becoming hotter? Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please start to slowly come out of this pose. Taking a moment to open up the hip crease again and to settle the back. Whatever way that is best for you. And we will take our last pose on our back. This is not always the case here in Yin. We don't always have a formal relaxation as you might find in other Hatha classes. But for today, we'll come to our back and we'll take a slightly restful pose as a final Yin posture, reverse butterfly. So please come onto your spine. Your head can face towards the nominal back of the room with your feet facing the front. And to do this posture, reverse butterfly, which is going to influence both the liver and the gallbladder line, please walk your feet out wide. And then allow your knees to fall inwards, judging the width of your feet by the extent to which your knees can touch. Your knees should touch here, rather than just hanging in space. Working on the rotators of the hip here as well. So start with the feet wide and the knees touching, and then feel free to walk the feet out some more if you are finding that you can do a little bit more, or walk the feet in if you're finding a little bit overtaxed in the hip line. I encourage you to, as you hold this mostly restful pose, restful for most people, maybe strong, but still sustainable, like many of our Yin poses. Just noticing if you're cooler or hotter than when you started practice. Are you more anxious, neurotic, or are you slightly less so? Of course, this can give rise to analysis, so let's just connect to the feeling tone of the body. And as you breathe in and out, is there more or less spaciousness? And neither I nor you should judge the success of your practice by being one or the other. I would just ask you to notice. Is each breath a little calmer or a little bit more desperate? because we're taking this pose as both a posture and a kind of relaxation point, I won't chime, but instead at this point just inviting you to either continue to hold this particular position of the body or to release it and just settle in a very natural and relaxed way in the position of your body that is comfortable. You'll often hear me in this class ask you to release the tyranny of Shavasana, which is the rigorous and rigid commitment to the idea that all relaxation must occur on the back with the limbs spread. Instead, just finding where we naturally become comfortable and at ease. No matter how that looks. Might now begin to rouse yourself a bit, choosing to find some movement in the body. And eventually moving yourself back up to seated in a dignified, open posture. You might notice as you take your seat what arises. Sometimes the feeling is one of relief. Sometimes calmness, somewhere in between. What arises as you come to the end of practice. We end class with the aspiration, which you can repeat internally to yourself. This aspiration being that all beings, including ourselves, experience a kind of happiness and the root of happiness. Hear each one invoked, and then there's a chime, and on the third one, we'll bow. May I experience happiness and the root of happiness. May you experience happiness and the root of happiness. May all beings everywhere experience happiness and the root of happiness. Taking the hands to the hip crease.